Welcome back, everyone. And so we're going to be talking about companionship's the title of this session, but really, in the cohort for Cultivating ministry, we talk a lot about social ecosystems of support for well-being, and those include different categories of relationships, and So actually the book that we go to, Flourishing in Ministry, categorizes 4 essential kinds of relationships for pastors. Significant others, which includes your spouse or partner, but also family and any friends who've had significant impact in your life. So it can be anyone from the past or present who's had a significant impact in your life in some way. Significant others, similar others, so peers, who have experiences in your vocation, and then congregation members and parishioners, and then 4th is denominational leaders. So all of those form, or if you're not in a denomination, you would just spiritual leaders in the church world that you're in, so the network that you're in. So significant others, similar others, congregation, and denominational leaders having different kind of positive, supportive relationships in each of those categories is actually essential for pastoral well-being from this research that came out with Flourishing in Ministry. So I wanted to have a conversation with our current cohort leader, Tom Smith, and then next year's cohort leader, Darryl Seay, who's been in the cohort as a participant. So both of them have been participants in the program and then now leading the cohort. And so it'll be the 8th cohort that starts in January. So I wanted to give them a chance to share a little bit about their life in ministry, keep it brief, but think about especially who are the most formative and enduring people in your initial ministry calling, and do you still, if you interact with them still, what does that look like? The most formative and enduring people in your ministry vocational calling. So as you share about yourself, just think about that. Tom?
Sure. So I was in business for 15 years and felt lost a bit and started volunteering with the high school youth at my church, and eventually left the corporate world to be a youth and family minister at our local congregation. And one of the people that came alongside me was the pastor of that church, Chuck Merkner, and he encouraged me. He gave me opportunities to preach and kind of affirm my gifts along the way. I eventually went to seminary and was ordained in the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And my first call was in northwest Wisconsin, very rural, more rural than I'd ever lived. The other colleagues were at least a half-hour drive, and I remember thinking out of seminary, I've got this. I'm not 20 something. I've been kind of have know what's going on, and very quickly, like 3 months in, it's like I can't do this alone. And so I drove to the tech study, and one of the key mentors was Lewis Thompson. He was the pastor in Osseo, a Lutheran church, and he said, "I'll make the coffee, you guys have to drive." And I remember one time, about a year into my ministry there, he calls me like on a Tuesday, and he says, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, pastor stuff. And he said, why don't you meet me at my house at 7 a.m. and pack a bag? And I'm like, what's happening? So I've got a 15-foot boat, and we're going to go out on Lake Superior, and we're not going to tell anyone except our families that we're going to go. So I didn't know what to expect, but we get on Lake Superior, big lake, 15-foot boat, small boat, but Lewis knew what he was doing, and we didn't catch any fish, but we spent the night hanging out, and then went to a Apostle Island, and it was a gorgeous day. I remember just sitting there with him. We didn't really say anything until we were about ready to go, and he kind of looked at me and said something like, well, not enough, but it's what we've got. And so we went back so coming from the business world, I had this 7 to 5, schedule in my mind, Monday through Friday. And so what he helped me to do was to recognize that the seasons of ministry aren't scheduled like that. And so when you have an opportunity to be filled, you take it, because there'll be seasons when you don't have that opportunity. So I get emotional because I accepted a call in Kenosha and heard that Lewis had died at 57.
Oh, wow.
And so it just like affirms that, the time is now. It's not like tomorrow to build these kinds of relationships, and that the people in this room are people to connect with. I mean, it's an opportunity, really, open handshake, a hug to connect with, and it's life-giving. And so I try to honor Lewis by being that for others.
Okay, well, my journey to ministry is a little unusual, similar to Tom's. I actually felt called to ministry shortly after getting converted to Christ, but refused to go. And so I went to grad school to get a master's degree in counseling so that I could be a Christian counselor and teacher, because I simply was not going to preach the word. I would never pastor, ever. And about 10 years in to doing what I wanted to do, I was finishing up my degree. I was back in Nashville, which is where I'm from. I lived in Memphis for 10 years, going undergrad and grad school. I was back in Nashville. I was doing an internship at Vanderbilt University. I went to a revival at the church my mom was a part of now, and God just began to deal with me about when am I going to finally say yes to what He called me to. And for 3 nights I was in torture. I was in torment. God just would not leave me alone every night. I'd be crying. And finally, on the 3rd night, my mom says to me, well, why don't you just tell God yes? And I went in my room and said, yes, Lord, whatever you want, I'll do it. And so I accepted the calling into ministry, and the pastor of the church where I was, he was probably in his 50s, early 60s at the time. When I shared with him I felt called to ministry, his words to me were, really? Why don't you go sell dope? Why don't you be a pimp? You'll make more money doing those things. I said, no, God called me to ministry. He said, well, okay, I know. So you'll preach your first sermon on. This was September, in 3 weeks in October. No training. If you're really called, God will give you something to say.
That's right.
Pastor Norris P. Johnson was his name. And he entrusted me to preach. He shared with me his ideas of ministry. And he gave me the opportunity. I've been preaching probably in 2 months. And he was sick one Sunday and called me while I was at the church building. He said, well, you're going to preach this morning, and I have to go to another church this afternoon, and you're going to go preach. Now, remember, I've been in ministry 2 months. My formal training for ministry was 0. None. God gave me a word, I preached it, it was fine. From there, I became a part of a local church in Nashville after a couple of years where the pastor really invested in those who felt a call to ministry. Pastor Joseph Moore Walker III, who was now Bishop Joseph Moore Walker III, who was the president of the Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship of America. And he poured into me. He allowed me to preach and trained me to preach. He supported me in my ministry. He saw the call in my life. encourage those who were called to preach to go get trained to actually understand not just the art of preaching, but theology.
Right.
And so I went and got a master's degree in divinity. He was probably early on in my call the most influential person in my life. Fast forward, I moved here in '99. Met my wife in church at Mount Zion in Nashville. She's from Milwaukee. Moved up here when I finished my divinity degree and launched LTM Ministries and Liberty Truth Ministries in 2000. With my wife, she and I have been co-pastoring for the last 25, almost 26 years. And moving here, I knew nobody. I knew my wife. But I met a couple of very significant pastors who had an amazing impact on my ministry. One was, at the time, Pastor Walter Harvey from Parkland Assembly of God, now Bishop Walter Harvey, and he and I connected because God gave me a vision for doing a deliverance revival. And he said, sure, you can do it here in Parkland. Didn't know me from Adam. Not only that, we'll donate the space and we'll fully participate. And he and I made a connection, and we have been connected for over 20 years now. I respect and honor him. He has poured into me consistently for the last 20 plus years. The other pastor who did that is no longer here in the earth. His name is Clarence Hill from Amazing Ministries. When I moved up to Milwaukee, he was really just very open and sharing, and always gave me an opportunity to become a minister and to be around him, to see the pace of life. He moved as a pastor. And so those were probably, I give all three of them credit, even Pastor Johnson with his bizarre but well-meaning. What? I mean, so those are the people who were most significant in my early call.
So, kind of talked a little bit about your formation and your past experiences. What about persevering, into, Tom's retired, Darryl, you've been pastor for 25 years. How do you keep going? And specifically when you feel isolated professionally, personally, or you don't seem to have some strong supportive relationships available. There's different seasons of ministry. So how do you keep going?
Wow. You want me to start?
If you guys don't, I mean, we're here, so.
So honestly, for the first 5 years of pastoring, I think I probably turned in my resignation letter to God monthly. Wow. I don't have to do this, God. You remember, I was working full-time, pastoring full-time. Lord, I really don't have to do this. If this is not you, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But something really significant happened about a year into ministry. I met a young pastor. He had started his church 4 months after we had started, and we just instantly connected. And Pastor Randy Nichols, Bishop Randy Nichols, he and I became brothers in the Lord. And so whenever I felt overwhelmed and isolated, we would spend time together and talk and share and talk about the struggles of being young pastors, the struggles of really trying to navigate ministry when I didn't have mentors in Milwaukee. I met Bishop Harvey, I met Pastor Hill, and they were there, but during those lonely times, it was really leaning into God, having at least one person in my life that was on a similar journey as me that I could talk to and share with, and we could really pray together, and our wives got along, and so we became the fearsome foursome. We spent a lot of time together doing talking and praying and visioning what ministry could look like. So that for me, and just knowing it was, like I said, here, God, I quit. I don't have to. And every time God said no, I called you to this, you're going to do what I said.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, so I kind of skipped over the 9 years of saying no to God, and I remember what did it for me was I got up one day and I said, whenever whenever you think you're feeling called into ministry, you're going to tell yourself you cannot go. You are not allowed to go. And that lasted like 5 minutes. When I had that thought, should I go to it? It's like, well, you can't go, Tom. And it's like, well, I'm going. And then it's like, oh, you just said that. So all that to say is, those 9 years, I kind of process this call so that when those times come, like the first relationship, which I guess we assume, but it's that relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And so in those moments, I thought to myself, especially during COVID or staffing stuff or whatever, Jacob Blake's killing and all of that, I remember thinking, I'm going to, Jesus called me into this, so I'm going to be faithful. I may not do the right thing. I may not do what other people think I ought to do, but I'm going to do what I think the Lord is calling me to do. And then having, Larry, and Larry was in Kenosha, and John Bischoff and other pastors, other colleagues that I could say that to, who understood and came, were there, so you could pick up the phone and call, and could meet for a walk or something like that. So, but ultimately, it was this sense of my baptismal identity, and God called me into this, and so I'm going to trust that call, because I think I kept coming back to that. At the end of the day, that's all I had was this call, and to try to do it as faithfully as I could.
So, how have you and continue to maintain that relationship with the Lord in your ministry, in the day in and day out, all the different demands, and there's highs and lows, and just the grind of it before you're down. So how do you, we assume, I think, that spiritual leaders have a great relationship with the Lord, or the average person may be sitting in the pew, so to speak, but that's not always true, and so how it's a challenge for all of us. And so how do you maintain that unity with the Lord, and then kind of dovetailing into same with your spouse and your family?
Well, I think for me, initially there was some intentionality of reading Bible, study and prayer on my own, and that I still do, but it's morphed into more like kind of daily conversations, walking around. So it isn't like there's a time where somehow Jesus is like not around or what have you, that there's this dialogue that's happening in the high times, the low times, in between times, this kind of conversational-esque way of praying, I guess it is. And then being around other people. I've been blessed with a spouse who also has a sense of call to ministry. She's not a pastor, but she supported all of our ministry journey, and so I think about how much of a gift that was, because I know colleagues that didn't have that whose spouses didn't either want to go to church or didn't have a church, and I always wondered how hard that must have been to not be able to pray with your spouse and worship with your spouse on when we're on vacation and stuff. And so I think caring for that for me was like the kind of the core relationship was with my spouse and then my 2 kids.
For me, it all begins and ends with my relationship with God. So I'm very intentional about spending time with God on a daily basis. I set aside time to be alone with God, to commune with God, to converse with God, to dig into the Word, to apply the Word. My congregants know that I spend a lot of time reading and studying devotionals, reading and studying the text, praying the text, so that I can have something from which God can pour out of. Because if this isn't right for me, mean, for me, if the vertical isn't right, this will never be right. I've demonstrated over and over again that if I'm not right with God, I might want to be right with you, but I'm not going to be. I know me. You know, I can mess up without any help. And so I have to stay grounded in relationship with God. And I do that in the morning, but I also throughout the day, I'm living in prayer. You know, praying in such a way. You know, I'm talking to God about it. And then I'm blessed because my spouse, she says I didn't tell her before we got married that I was called to pastor, and that she's going to co-pastor with me. I'm not sure that's quite true. It just depends on who you ask. You know, but we have been partners in life, in marriage, and ministry for over 25 years. And if she was not there, I could not do it. There's no way I could. I wouldn't have the wherewithal to do it. And so I'm always thankful to God for her. She's my best friend. I married my very best friend. You know, going home for me is a joy. My house is a place of peace. It's a house of peace. My wife is the calm in my storm, because I'm the storm. I'm the storm. I'm not confused. She's the peace and make chaos, because I'm chaotic. You know, I listen. As one of my members said, "You'll vision us to death." I've always got some great vision God has given me, and she keeps me grounded. And so I prioritize my relationship with her. We still, after 20-something years, go on dates all the time. You know, I ground my family. I like around my family, my kids. I love them. I spend time with them. They're my priority. I miss ministry stuff to go to kids stuff. You know, because I'd rather miss the ministry stuff and leave my children and them love God than do the ministry stuff and them hate God. So that's to this day.
So you kind of started answering this, but what are the non-negotiables for you for relationship with the Lord and with spending time with your family, investing in those relationships? You mentioned, like you just said, you miss ministry stuff. Like maybe elaborate on that. And
because I believe our first ministry always has to be our family, period. If you're not ministering to your family, you're failing. I don't care how big the church is, or how many sermons you're preaching, I don't care how many revivals you're doing. If you're not ministering to your family, you're failing. If you're not loving them well and leading them by your example, because leadership is always first by example. And so I prioritize my family. My congregation knows my family comes first. I protected my family. We have a 21-year-old daughter that grew up in church. I protected her from people in the church who would try to put her in a position that she didn't need to be in. You know, I raised my two nephews. I protected them from the church so they could be harmed in the church. Because the church will harm pastors' kids. I know too many pastors' kids who are harmed by the church. And we took family vacations. We got away. We took family trips. We went out to family dinners. We had family meals together. We continue to do that to this day when they're in the city. And so that's my problem.
Yeah, I think just adding on to that, kind of the practical aspect, when my kids started having events at school, especially in the evening, I said to the leadership team, you know, there are how many other days in the week that we could have a meeting, but from 7 to 9 on Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever it was, my kids have a volleyball game or something, and I'm going to go to it. And so I'm available. We can have meetings before that or after that or whatever. But kind of like Darryl, I mean, you have to say it. I mean, you give some intentionality about it. I remember one time, on internships, our son was maybe 5 years old, and I was up there giving maybe my second or third sermon in this new congregation, this rural parish, and he started climbing under the pews around people's legs, and he would pop up and he would wave. And I had just started the sermon, and I'm about ready to kind of learn how to preach and everything, and I look at him, he's like. think there was like, what's Tom gonna do? And I just started laughing, and I said, I think my son wanted to give the sermon today. And, but I think that, as you say, though, Darryl, I mean, you kind of lead. I mean, you're showing, maybe there are members of the church that are thinking, you know, I need to be intentional about my family too, or however that might be. But I just want to add real quickly is that because there are times, as you all know, when you've got to get to the hospital, you've got to get to a certain place, you know, you have to go. So when there are times where the pressure like that isn't on, you know, invest in your family, just like the seasons, because you don't want your kids or your spouse hating the church or the Lord. And I like the way you said that. There, you're pouring love into them, and they'll give it back.
As a pastor's son, I appreciate those perspectives a lot. My dad took time away from the church to invest in us too, which I appreciate. Yeah, but there is those pressures from that you guys are kind of alluding to for pastors' kids. Either I feel like it's two extremes. Either you're expected to be the best kids in church, or you're the worst kids in church. That's kind of the stereotype, and it's kind of like you're trying to navigate.
So I think the important is, I didn't get it perfect. I want to be very clear. I messed up at times. Sometimes I did spend time in ministry when maybe I should have been at home. You know, and so I just think you have to learn that it is a journey.
I remember a couple of weeks ago, we kind of paid back, talking about pouring love. So I was visiting my daughter, she's 27 now, and she has Siri set up so that she doesn't like coming home to her apartment in the quiet. So I got there a few minutes early, and Siri starts playing this music. I don't know what's going on. And she comes in, and I say, so you're really kind of jamming out here to One Direction. And she looks at me, and she comes up with tears in her, she hugs me, and she says, thank you for loving me enough to know my music. Because she must have played that like through high school. It's like, One Direction, among other things, you know. And I don't know, God's grace, I got the name right, you know, but she said, well, you're really rocking the girl music, Dad, and but all that to say, you know, it's not only a meeting, but it's to like try to, when you are home, to try and be fully present. You know? That's the thing. Shut off the.
That's the
that's the challenge, as you all know.
Yeah, just let's open it up to the room too. Like, what are ways that you prioritize your relationship with the Lord and with your family, and those are most important relationships?
I have a routine in the morning that, again, I live in a parsonage, it's so sweet, out in the country. So there's 10 acres, and we have a beautiful campus. So I get up around, let's say, 6:30 and just walk the campus, and just walk with God, have that conversation. And then I'll come inside, get the coffee ready, do some yoga to loosen up because I'm getting old and want to stay flexible. And then I'll go downstairs with the fake candle lights, if you know what I mean, where you got a remote and they turn on, and just be still with the Lord with a cup of coffee, and it's just holy time, a good half hour, and so it leads to prayer, it leads to, Lord, who are you leading me to today to minister to, etc., and it's beautiful. And then back to the family, we have a regular rhythm of having breakfast as well as dinner together on a pretty much daily basis. It's my wife and I and our 26-year-old son who has some health issues along COVID. But it's a beautiful way to just be still and be together and read.
Well, Tom's a really great pastor. I was a crappy pastor in my 30s. And no, I was crappy pastor and a crappy father both, I think. I felt bad for my kids because I was a mission developer. And if you remember in the 90s, the way you started a church is you did 10,000 door-to-door visits or something like that.
Oh my.
So in my 30s, I did 7,000 or 8,000 in the Waukesha. And every evening I would be gone and my wife would. So I felt bad I had 2 young kids. And a few years, about 15 years ago, I told my kids, they're 35 and 30 now, I said, well, did you did you hate me? Did you think like I don't love you? And they go, Dad, we don't even love you. We didn't care. For them, they didn't care. But I had this guilt. They said, well, every Monday you took us to the zoo or out to eat, because I had Mondays, and then when they were sick and during the day, it was speech with us, I took them to the doctor. So in the evenings, I was gone doing all these dumb visits, recording the results of everyone, that was ministry in the 90s for mission and overs, believe it or not. But what they told me is that you showed us other ways, even though you were gone in the evening. That's what you guys were saying. I was thinking that powerful it is that I just take them out. On Mondays was my day off, and we would spend time together, just us. Mamas, so I think you have to, there are some challenges to being a pastor, especially certain kinds of pastors, but if you could find ways to compensate it. I said, yeah, there were blessings. I was free during the day. That was a trade-off.
Thanks for saying that, Larry.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the flexibility that ministry offers.
Right.
And also check with them 15 or 20 years later, see if they hate you.
Yeah.
They got over that. That really helps too.
There is grace for
Right, there's grace for you too.
There's grace for pastors too. I can testify to that.
Yes, that's my message.
Yeah. Thanks, Larry. And it's a real challenge, pastoral ministry is demanding. The book we go through talks about the flexibility paradox, and so your schedule is flexible, but there's also this assumption by people in the congregation a lot of times that flexibility means that you can and should be at every church event, but that they don't really see all the things that you're doing offline, so to speak. That's also ministry. And he tells some stories about he interviewed hundreds of pastors around the U.S. and surveyed about 10,000 pastors for this research, and he tells all these stories that it's amazing, like the kind of things that people say to pastors. But he tells a story about this one pastor who had the morning, had the morning off on Friday morning, and he was in his yard playing with his daughters, and a parishioner drove up, rolled by, stopped the car, reversed, rolled out the window and said, "Hey, pastor, shouldn't you be in the office?" And it's just so there's real demands and expectations that you're navigating, and I want to make sure that we're not, communicating in any of these conversations that it's all on you, because there's forces that are bigger, and that's where also the congregational relationship and communication, even about being very clear about boundaries and having a leadership support those boundaries, and you have something to say?
That's where I want to go.
Yes.
You just said the word boundaries.
Yep.
I think that's a very important thing to understand. You know that, and I want to get some perspective, but to know that we're going to hurt some folks because folks are not going to respect boundaries. You just said the man should be at the church not playing with his daughter on his off day.
Yeah.
So people don't respect boundaries. And I think one of the first things we got to make sure we set boundaries for ourselves and things that we will and won't do, and then also boundaries for other people. So they know that they have something to respect. So I just want to know how did you along your journey begin to realize that maybe you needed to set some different kind of boundaries?
For me, I used to think I needed to be available all day, every day, all the time for the saints. And I quickly learned that you can do that. That's one way to pastor. It is. And we can come up with all kinds of cute reasons why we do that. You can even use scripture to support it. Jesus was a which isn't even true that way, if you even read the text. But what I learned is the very people that you fail to set boundaries for yourself will often be the first ones that will jump ship at the given opportunity. The ones you pour into the most The ones you take at 12 o'clock at night call. Did you leave your house in the middle of the night, early morning to go be with? They'll be the very ones that will say, the Lord told me.
Preach.
It's always the Lord. Everybody knows that. It's always the Lord. And what do you say to that? How do you respond? The Lord told me.
He didn't tell me.
But I'm about to talk to me too, but anyway.
Here, I have a response to your story about the poll.
Can I finish?
I'm sorry.
And so what I learned was, I have to have some realistic boundaries with the saints. So one of the things I've done in the last year even is, I used to not take a given Saturday. I've always done things like I play golf. Any given Saturday when it's warm enough in Wisconsin, I play golf. I bowled for over 20-some years. I've been a bowler. I hold times aside. But then they all take a Sabbath. Mondays are typically my Sabbath. I don't do ministry stuff. I run my own business. I don't do business stuff. I pastor 6 days a week. Sabbath day for me, I rest. And it's helped me to move more at the pace of grace. And then I also, my phone stays out in another room at night. I don't have a house phone. I don't take calls in the middle of the night. I just don't. I go to bed. And when I go to bed, I go to sleep.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to add to that, emails, and we know these things are with us all. And I mean, if people have, I was saying to Timothy yesterday about it was a gift when I got a new phone and I couldn't figure out how to add the email. I spent a week like, I got to figure out how to get this on. No, you don't have to figure out how to get that. You can get your email at church because whatever someone emails me after 6 o'clock at night, it's probably going to be bad, and I don't need to deal with it until. But if it's an emergency, to have my cell phone and call, I mean, and it was, so I would invite you to just reflect on the cell phones and the emails, and is there a way that you can maybe kind of take a little more control of that so that you can, just kind of connecting with Darryl saying to have those boundaries, and Don, those boundaries.
Larry,
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. You said, your story that said, why aren't you in the office? A good pastor doesn't just go and sit in the office alone.
Right.
A real pastor is out there doing things,
Yes.
especially if you're creating new community. Our bishop once told me, Larry, I love it, I can never get you, you're never in the office. You're always having coffee, or you're doing business, or you're with somebody in the community.
Yeah.
If you're just sitting in the office, I'm sorry, not preaching. If you're just sitting in the office, maybe you're not doing everything you should do. Now, some of you are big administrators of big, powerful churches, and you should be in the office. But a real pastor gets out of the community a little bit, right? And meets new people.
Sure.
And interests. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm done now.
Well, I think that, you're raising something that it's like different people have different expectations of what a pastor is, and so that includes the pastor themselves as well as the people who they're serving. And so some people will say, why aren't you in the office? Oh, and then other people will say, why are you in the office? Shouldn't you be blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, pastors are always navigating these tensions, and you can't please everybody, but even when you're not trying to please everybody, there's still expectations and demands. But I think a big, just from our conversations, not just this one, but in the cohort, a really big thing that keeps surfacing for me is communication, and clear communication to people in the congregation. And I'm kind of, I don't know, I want to hear your thoughts, but I think that almost needs to happen from someone besides the pastor about the demands and also the boundaries issue. Like Don, you were saying, like other church leaders need to protect the pastor's time too.
Yes.
Oh,
and communicate, hey, pastor is, this is what they're, and to kind of shield the pastor from some of those unrealistic expectations. And yeah.
So Peter, one of the things that we've done in our ministry is I serve on a team. My doctoral dissertation was on shared leadership. And so I believe that if we're going to have healthy, godly, biblical leadership in the church, it must be shared. In the Bible, there is no single leader.
Right.
Jesus wasn't a single leader. Quit telling people that. Jesus had a team of 12 around him. Okay? And so we have a team, and if it's not something directly that aligns with what my assignment is within the team, so I have an assignment like all the other team members do, I don't get involved. Right. Somebody says, well, Pastor, can we, I'm sorry, that's not my role. Talk to Sister so-and-so, talk to Pastor so-and-so, and I don't get involved. I said, boy, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't you go ask so-and-so? That's what they do. And I think if we stop believing, I'm doing the preacher, I pray for you. If we stop believing we have to be the answer and the solver to everything in a helper, it's our own fault. You train people how to treat you as pastor. I'm trying to calm down, but we train people how to treat us. I can't tell you the last time I had a call at 12 a.m. in the morning. Because they know I ain't answering. Because if they're dead, they're going to be dead at 8.
That's right.
They're not going to be dead at 12. I'm sorry. They're already dead. What am I going to do? Running out there now? Okay, now I go out at 1 to go get. So I think we have to do a better job as pastors. I learned this. As a young pastor, I didn't know it well, and I learned it. Of setting boundaries and raising up others to share leadership with us. My church membership is less than 100. So don't tell me you don't have enough people. Did you catch it? That's not the issue. Never not having enough is what you want here. Jesus only had 12. Only 11 could be relied on. One was stealing.
But it's just
and training your people how to treat you. I think that's really key.
Yeah.
So I was in cohort 2, which was during COVID, so we didn't get to meet, but one of my dear Baptist pastor colleagues said, he put it this way, he said, it took me about 5 years to teach my congregation how to love me. Because they didn't know how to love me when I first got there, and we had to bump heads a bit, so they knew how to love me. And that was just, that's gold right there.
Okay, one more question, and then, unless there's other questions. Okay. Just one more question, and then we'll be done. But what's one practical discipline you have cultivated to maintain friendships with people outside of the church and outside of ministry? One practical way you've done that.
So I'll just real quickly, I have to be intentional about it because I lose track of time. I don't know where these 2 days have gone, let alone. And so if I'm not putting on my calendar, call, like I'm going to stop by the home of a colleague this afternoon. If I'm not intentional about it, then it's 2028 before I know it. And so for me, I've had to be, and maybe that doesn't seem spontaneous or whatever, but it just, for practical, I kind of think like, okay, who haven't I seen or talked to in the last 5 or 6 weeks? So, but I have to set time aside to do that, to think about. I've learned that however you want to frame self-care, that it ought to be it should have been a higher priority for me earlier in my ministry, that it isn't like a luxury, but to care for yourself by building those kinds of relationships, off-stage relationships that Bloom talks about, is life-giving. And you can pour it back into the congregation, makes you a better pastor.
So me and my brother, Randy Nichols, Bishop Randy Nichols, sitting back there, that's my friend. We hang out, we talk. Mike over there, he's my friend. We're not always talking ministry. Sometimes on the golf course, we're talking house family. What vacation you taking? We go take golf together. Hey Mo, he's not only my brother in the CIA, that's my friend. We spend time together. I cultivate the relationships that are necessary so that my whole world doesn't spin around the church. Because I need other people in my life to help me stay grounded. I need real relationships that are not based on superficial things, but we can have honest conversations, you know. I almost died a few years ago at the bowling alley. I had 2 massive pulmonary embolism and lost consciousness. I was dying, and I came to my friend holding me and said, brother, you're not going to leave me. Brother, you're not going to leave me. That's my brother. And I think if you don't cultivate those kind of relationships outside the pulpit, outside the church, you'll end up drowning yourself to death in ministry.
One of the things that I've done since serving a congregation is I've become a certified coach, and I enjoy the brain science behind coaching, so I kind of work in the area where brain science connects with faith. And one of the things that connects with what we're talking about is if a person's stress is the difference between the real and perceived demands on them and the real and perceived resources, then the only way to deal with stress is to lower the demands or increase the resource. And the one resource that we don't take advantage of is each other, to reach out to those friends and to get ideas and just to be heard. So it's a way.
Tom Smith's one of my resources that lifts me up when I'm tired. I call him up and he tells me some cool study, just like you heard. And we have coffee, and so I just want Tom to know that he's one of my resources. Listen, thank you, Tom.
Thank you both so much. Let's give them a hand.